Hey everybody, so I wanted to showcase my Franken Mosin build and the progress that I've made on it, and kind of start a video series on it. So if you saw my other videos recently on Mosins, it was this gun right here. I showed the video on how to remove the barrel and also how to reinstall in headspace a Mosin barrel. It's not too difficult of a job, but you've got to have a basic understanding of headspace and have some tools. So I started this build because I got the receiver for free that had a barrel stub on it where someone had drilled 3 holes for an Ati Scope Mount. If you've ever had one of those before, you know that they only have 2 holes. So someone, I guess, thought, hey, let's get some extra rigidity and drill a 3rd hole. Well, that 3rd hole was drilled through the barrel, so that made the gun obviously garbage. You can't plug a hole in a chamber. Well, you shouldn't plug a hole in a chamber. So that's how this build started off. It sat around for probably close to a year, just the receiver on a workbench. It wasn't, a really great quality Mosin, but the bluing on the blue parts were really nice. So I finally decided to go ahead and build up a rifle, but the barrels got really hard to find. Used to be able to find Mosin barrels all over the place for relatively inexpensive, but I couldn't. There were no 9130 barrels anywhere, and the ones that I could find were over $175. So I finally found this one from a surplus gun part store, and this is a Chinese M53, I think. I may be mistaken, M53 barrel. So it is a short barrel with pinned front and rear sights, and what's cool about that is the front sight can be removed because it's pinned, and it can be put back on if you choose to cut the barrel and turn it back down. So that's pretty neat. But anyway, so what I'm going to do with this is just kind of have some cheap fun with it. I've got a low power scope on here. You can see I did a bent bolt job on it. The bolt had a bunch of holes drilled in it from where I think they wanted to use the ATI bent bolt handle. I didn't get that, but I had this bolt with no handle on it at all. So I was able to use one of the holes and kind of mill it off center and thread and do a bent bolt handle. So that worked out okay. I already had this really nice Boyd's stock laying around, and I went ahead and used the ATI scope mount that the gun came with. Because since I put a new barrel in, I could still actually use that small threaded portion in the receiver. So it worked out after all. But this is just kind of the mock-up form. I test fired it without the scope or anything like that on it. Once I head spaced it, the rifle shoots good. And then I just have this setup on here because I wanted to make sure I could bore sight it. So sometimes when your scope mounting gets wonky, you'll never be able to sight the gun in. So before I do any other work to it, like barrel threading and things like that, I wanted to make sure the gun would be able to shoot straight. So I just finished bore sighting it. I could still get it on target out to 120 yards. So we're going to go ahead and start this build, or keep going with the build. The goal is to get a relatively good shooting rifle that's suppressed and kind of short and handy, and just, kind of a fun build. So the barrel, I think, is 20.5 inches. Let's measure it real quick. Measure to the chamber, which is right there. So yep, the barrel is 20.5 inches long, but we do have 3/4 of an inch over here of counter bore. So what I'm going to do is, I'd like to retain the iron sights, but in reality I'm never going to use them again. So I'm going to take the pins out of here, press off the rear sight base, and then I'm also going to do the same with this. I'm going to try to keep both of those intact if I can, because they're relatively hard parts to find. So maybe if you guys need one of those, let me know. And then we're going to be cutting the barrel back to the good threads, putting a target crown on it, and we're going to thread it. The barrel diameter is not big enough for 5/8 threads, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread it 1/2 by 28, and I'm going to use a very high quality sleeve, and we're going to sleeve it up to 5/8. That way we can run all the typical 30 cal muzzle devices. And I want to do a suppressor video with this thing. I've got an OSS can that I've been wanting to test out against a SIG can. So a baffleless versus a traditional can. So I just figured that'd be fun. So we'll cut the barrel down a little bit. It'll probably be about 18.5 or 19 inches. suppressed, and then I'm almost positive we're going to have to hand load for this rifle to get it at its peak accuracy. The barrel, I don't exactly remember. It slugged a little bit larger than most. We definitely can't use 308 bullets. We may be able to get away with 311s. I'm thinking we're going to use 303 British projectiles to load up in here. My plans are, I think I'm going to go ahead and re-harden the receiver, because the receiver is kind of soft. When you, if you just push straight back, it's fine. But if you have any kind of cant inside here, that bolt really sticks. So I'm going to test the receiver and test the bolt parts as well, and see which ones have gone soft or maybe weren't properly hardened in the first place. And we're going to re-harden those. From there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be bedding this Ati Scope Mount. So on the hex receivers, these fit up pretty well. On the round receivers, they do not. So you can see inside there, there's a pretty large gap between the scope base and the top of the receiver. It's there on the front and the back. You can't see because I'm not using a very good camera, but there's a gap inside there, and I can actually see one of the bolts, or one of the pieces of hardware. So I'm going to be bedding this. I'm just going to use JB Weld. I think that'll work great, especially in that area where everything's clamped down, and it's just going to get rid of all that void in there. And when you have a void like that, you have more pressure on the mounting hardware, and you have more of a chance of things moving around. So I may do a video on that. We're going to bed this with JB Weld, and then we're going to do a few things to the bolt. You can see on the bolt here, the way I did the bent bolt handle was I used a bolt or a piece of rod, and I bent it at an angle, and then I threaded the end of it, and then I threaded the inside of a ball. Threaded them on together with JB Weld inside here, and then I also threaded the end of this angle going this way, and I threaded the inside of this bolt. Threaded it on, put JB Weld in there, and then once the JB Weld's set, I went ahead and I drilled a hole through here and pinned it. So now this bent bolt handler's not going anywhere. It's JB welded and it's pinned in place. I may go ahead and fill these two other holes here. I'm not sure. If I do that, we'll definitely have to re-harden the bolt body. The scope that's on this thing is just one that I got for free. This company here sent me a scope. I'm actually pretty surprised with the glass quality. There's no blurring around the edges or anything, but beyond that, I don't know. It does have bullet drop compensator, and it has wind hash marks. I don't know if they're accurate or not. The instructions were a little weird. So yeah, I don't know. It's going to be on there for now, and we'll test it out. It is a 2-7, and it is a 1-inch diameter tube. I'm using worn rings, which are my favorite. These rings are really nice. The two-piece, the clamping ones are really great. So we're gonna do a few other things to this gun to really fine-tune it and actually turn it into a really good, high-quality firearm. Right now, it's just, you know, super loose and crappy and threw it together. But we're gonna go in and do things like lightening the lock time on the bolt by cutting a lot of this material off and lightening this area. And I'll show you how to do some of that stuff yourself. So I really love to keep up and communicate with you guys. So if you have any questions or suggestions on what we have going on here, or if you have experience with, you know, working on Mosins, I'd really love to hear it down in the comments. So yeah, stay tuned, and we'll have some fun. Thanks for watching.